Inside LAFC Podcast has been part of LAFC since season 1, and it is back again here for the start of the 2025 season number 8 for LAFC. We are thrilled to be with you again. There are some changes to this year. First and foremost, we are live on LAFC YouTube, live on LAFC Facebook. So every Monday, 12:30 Pacific time, tune in, tell your friends. You can be part of the show. Leave a comment. We're happy to answer some questions. And I'm not here to bury the lead, but it's not just me. We are joined by LAFC Original, the man who would take the train from Rancho Cucamonga to the Performance Center for every training session and then ride his bike from the train station, the one and only Benny Feilhaber. Benny, it is great to have you. I'm really excited about working with you all season long.
Thanks, Max. And you had one part wrong, though. It wasn't a bike that I rode from the train station. It was a scooter.
My apologies.
The rest of the story was correct, and it's a pleasure to be here. I'm excited. We've been connected ever since 2007 with your great goal call in the Gold Cup. So it's good to be working together with you again.
We're already getting a lot of comments welcoming you back. Roto58, welcome back, Benny. And to touch on what Benny Feilhaber, or Benny, I don't know, I have to reference your first and last name, 2007 Gold Cup, one of the greatest goals in U.S. men's national team history that won the Gold Cup against Mexico. I got to broadcast there at Soldier Field, so we're always connected. And to me, that is still the biggest call I've ever made on a game. So I thank you, Benny, for that magical moment, a game that I thought USA was going to lose for some point, but they were able to pull it out.
Oh, second half was magical. So like you said, the goal is something that I don't vividly remember, blacked out a little bit, to quote Will Ferrell, but you brought it to life many times over again on the replays. So thank you.
It was a team effort, and I get 50% of the credit as we move forward. And I think he has an award there on that bookshelf. But all season long, we'll be going back to yesteryear and talk to Benny about a great many things. But Benny is dialed into this league and still with LAFC, and we will be here every Monday recapping the games on the weekend. But this is going to be show 1, as we will look to give you a season preview of some of the good things to look forward to, some of the players to watch, including the new players, as well as a tactical breakdown. And I want to start here, Benny, with the fact that the preseason's over. It ended last Tuesday with a game against Club America at BMO Stadium. Prior to that, about a week at Coachella, some games here locally. The preseason priorities. Let's go back to your playing days. You were here. What do you look to get out of the preseason to prepare you? What is on your checklist to get you ready for when the games matter? And the games matter tomorrow with the CONCACAF Champions Cup, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But looking at the preseason, what is important for a player, and you particular, to be ready for when games matter?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and I think it's a different answer potentially for different players, right? Guys that are veterans, guys that are rookies trying to make it on the team, guys that are, trying to have a breakout year. At the end of the day, fitness is number one. You want to try and build your game fitness, which you just can't get any other way, right? With training, you can work out in the off season, you can go to the gym. The training sessions that lead up to those games are one thing, and then playing in the game is a completely different thing. And then look, I think it's great to be LAFC, where they have the ability as well at the end of Coachella, where you're getting a lot of these games in front of no fans during the daytime, where there's not a lot of motivation to play in those games. And you get the last game against Club America at BMO Stadium, which I might, by the way, refer to as the bank sometimes. I'm sorry, I don't know if that's allowed anymore, but that's how I remember it. But in front of fans against a very good team, one of the top teams in CONCACAF. So the ability to have that game, find the chemistry, the cohesion with the players, for Steve to be able to see who fits in with who, and how the team is going to react in now a big time situation going into the CCC against Colorado.
And to your point, this Club America, LAFC has not had a preseason game like this. When you were there, when they played Dortmund, that certainly had the feel of it. There was that Peñarol game. They played Vissel Kobe, but nothing really like Club America, which, they packed the place. So just to your point, this, and Steve Cherundolo said this too, about how important with this game against the Colorado Rapids looming, how important it is to create that game environment just for the players to quicken the pulse, to get the, I mean, that was, I imagine those guys, you're not supposed to worry about the results of the preseason, but I imagine they walked off that field and said, yeah, we won this game 2-1. We're ready to go.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, honestly, I think fans feel it, right? If fans are tuning in to watch the live stream of the Coachella games, and then whether they go to the stadium or watch the game on TV against Club America, it's two completely different competitions, albeit both are friendlies. And so it does provide something completely different. I think the team and the coaching staff should be excited that they had that opportunity. I think it definitely allows them to be more fully prepared for what's to come in these next couple of weeks.
And we hope that this is something that they can duplicate in the years ahead. I know Coach Cherundolo has said that. I imagine the players would agree, because it's a special place to be in there with that atmosphere and to get the fans ramped up as well. We are live here on LAFC YouTube. We are live on LAFC Facebook. Come one, come all. Have a question for Benny. We were happy to ask there at any point here, so drop them in the comment section, and we will move forward from that. And again, the preseason now, I mean, there's a game coming up, the Colorado Rapids. It is 7 p.m. Pacific time on FS2. Check about TUDN as well. I believe you can get it there in Espanol. So this game, we know it's going to be cold. We'll talk about that because there's some news about the CONCACAF Champions Cup as well. But this is the beginning of a very busy stretch, and this is something that LAFC is grown accustomed to after winning MLS Cup in 2022. I believe they had 53 games, which was a record. I mean, that was, uncharted waters back in the day, Benny, where you'd cross 50 games. They, I think, got to 50 in 2024, and they would probably expect, if there's success in the CONCACAF Champions and Leagues Cup, that they can probably get to 50 and the playoffs as well. The challenges of having that, and if LAFC gets by the Rapids, which we're not going to put, knock on wood, we're not going to put, the cart in front of the horse here. But if they get by the Rapids, they will have 8 games in 4 weeks to start the season. So that's already a lot of work. How do you prepare as a player for Wednesday, Saturday, right out of the preseason, where you cannot, I imagine, duplicate real game? You have to mimic it a little bit, but how do you get that so you have wind in your sails for this stretch?
Yeah, I mean, there is no magic way to get prepared for 8 games, as you said, in 4 weeks, 2 games a week. And I know Steve has talked about this in the past, the ability to have, depth in the roster, a bigger roster so that you can utilize more players in times like these. So it'll be interesting to see not only obviously what the staff does in regard to, do we play the same 11, against Colorado and then on the weekend and then against Colorado again? Do we prioritize the 2 CONCACAF games to get through to the next round? How much, is there going to be maybe a few rotational players, right, that play in the weekend opener against Minnesota? And so, look, there's so many questions, and as a player, you just have to be ready and obviously allow the coach and the staff to make the right decisions. But I can't imagine even, a guy like Denny Bouanga, which I feel like plays every single minute of every single game. I can't imagine he's going to play 8 games in 4 weeks to start the season. So, you can call me out if I'm wrong 4 weeks time from now, but I would be extremely surprised if anybody other than maybe, a goalkeeper is able to do that in the first 4 weeks of the season.
I think Denny Bouanga would like to, but I think it would be commonsensical to probably get him some minutes. But we're going to talk about the roster build, but they are going to have to share the ball a lot here in these opening weeks until the team gets to that fitness level. How long do you feel the fitness hits to where you're 100% at the start of the season? Are you supposed to be there right after preseason where you go, I'm ready to go, or after a few games under belt? Where do you think that falls for a player?
I think that it depends on the staff. The staff is usually what decides where they want their players, right? And so along the course of my career, I played in different teams, and I can say that when I was at LAFC with Bob Bradley, he put a much bigger emphasis, albeit that was year one of a roster that's never played together, on the soccer aspect, or as he would call it, the football, right? So there wasn't a lot of fitness in that preseason at UCLA, and it was getting to know your players, getting to feel comfortable with the style of play that we wanted to play. And you could see that right in the beginning of the season. We played 6 games on the road where there were some moments of like, oh my God, what just happened, right, against the Galaxy, so to speak. But then some unbelievable moments of pure soccer. And so that's kind of what you get. And so, and there's other places where I played where fitness was a bigger priority and you kind of come out of the gate flying. In my opinion, I think it takes about a month of the season for any player to really feel like they're close to 100%. And in a perfect scenario, with the season being as long as it is, and the difficulties in MLS with the travel, the weather, right? Right now we're dealing with really cold weather. In 3 months, we'll be dealing with 100-degree weather. And so it's about, being ready at the right time, being fit, being healthy. And so I think Steve is going to be very wary of that. And I would be somewhat surprised if we don't see some rotation in these first 8 games, but I do think that we'll see some consistency in whatever it is that he decides is the most important. And again, this is a guess, but I would think that CCC is where he starts with, the top lineup, so to speak.
And remember, LAFC have been in the CCC on 2 occasions, and they made the final. So that is the goal, to get pretty far. As we'll get Benny back.
There you go.
There he goes.
Live
TV. And Atlanta, he has to illuminate that face. We encourage you to ask questions. We see some questions about incoming transfers. Nothing new. We have spoken to LAFC, and when you talk to John Thorrington or Neil McGuinness or Steve Trundle, they're still active in this transfer market, which will continue. So as LAFC is always one of the more active teams, I would expect that to continue here in the days ahead. Let us talk about this roster build. And you mentioned how important it is with regards to creating depth. And with all these games, nobody should put their head down if they didn't see a lot of minutes in preseason, because there's going to be a lot of games to fill. And outside of a couple, I think you said Hugo Lloris, maybe Denny Bwanga, all these positions, there will be some rotation. So the new faces of LAFC, I'm going to get your thoughts on not just the new players, but some players that are going to be playing important roles from one season to the next. I'm going to start with the midfield, you being a midfielder, Benny, to talk about what we saw in the preseason. So we had a 2-man midfield with wing backs a lot of the time. We might still have that in 2025, but most of the preseason, a 3-man midfield: Timothy Tillman, Mark Delgado, Igor Jesus. So Igor Jesus, Mark Delgado, not a lot of time to incorporate into the squad, but they've been given that responsibility. What are the things that they need to do to not only settle in with LAFC, but to be effective in such an important stretch here where CONCACAF Champions Cup hopes are on the table?
Right. And look, I think and again, we're going to have to get a new light for me over here. This new light, this ring light. What's that?
It's the first show.
It's the first show. We're going to have to work out the kinks. We're going to have to get a new ring light sent to me so that it can properly
you still look good in the
illuminate the room here. But no, to answer your question, I think, look, Marky Delgado, I don't have too many questions about him, right? He's been in MLS for so long. We might have to do this without the ring light, guys. Is that okay?
Yeah, let's go.
So Marky Delgado is a guy that's been in the league for so long. He's extremely comfortable. And he's a guy that you know exactly what you're going to get every single day, right? And I expect the exact same from him as we saw from him at the LA Galaxy, at Toronto, and in his entire career in MLS. He's going to give you hard work. He's going to, bring the ball out of the back, turn defensive actions into attacking actions, and he's going to be, hunting the ball in the midfield. And then the other guy that you mentioned, Igor Jesus, is an incredibly interesting player. He's going to be the defensive midfielder, right? He's a guy that's taken over for Ilie Sanchez from these last few years. And he is definitely a guy that wants to have the ball at his feet. And he's a guy that has the ability to, get that attack going, getting the ball off these defenders and spreading the game out and making it difficult to, press LAFC. And I think that the biggest question with him, just like any new player in MLS, is the adaptation period. And so I'm expecting him to be able to adapt quickly. He looked pretty good for large portions of the Club America game, but I think he is one of the key new faces here on LAFC to allow LAFC to play the way that Steve Cherundolo imagines that they can.
Well, and I mentioned the midfield. How important is what they do to helping incorporate the front three to get those chances? Because LAFC was one of the better defensive teams in 2024. They were really good defensively in the preseason, so we take that with a grain of salt. But the offense usually comes around a little bit later, but when you see those combination plays, how important is that to getting Bouanga, getting Giroud and others the possessions?
Yeah, it's incredibly important, and especially because of the types of players that we have in the front three, right? Denny Bouanga, David Martinez, Giroud, all guys that are not going to come all the way back, grab the ball from, a center back or an outside back and bring the ball up the field. They want to have the ball in dangerous areas, right? In one-on-one situations, and sure, you can create some of those off the counterattack without necessarily a midfield. But when the game starts and it's 0-0, you need the midfield to break down some kind of pressure that the other team is trying to impose to allow then the ball to get to Denny Bouanga, David Martinez, and now creating those chances and opportunities for Giroud to finish inside the box. And so I think that midfield three of right now, it seems to be Igor Jesus, Marky Delgado, and Timothy Tillman, is going to have to grow and find their chemistry quickly, because right now we have two new players in those spots that haven't played necessarily together. And so the only, guy coming back from last year is Tillman. And so it will be extremely interesting to see how they, function together and if they can kind of get that quicker rather than later.
Yeah, that's top of my list, Benny, when I look at how LAFC is set up. I want to go to some of the players, but the tactical setup with the three-man midfield, how do you expect LAFC to do what they want to do with the group that we saw at Club America? There might be some changes. I imagine, again, that could change from game to game with all the matches coming in. But how do we expect what LAFC want to do under Coach Cherundolo with what we saw from Club America with the first game of the season coming up tomorrow?
Yeah, and look, I have a lot of questions about that. And the reason being is because I think Steve Cherundolo wants to try and have a little bit more possession than they had against Club America. Having said that, Club America is one of the best teams in CONCACAF, and they are known for having very good possession. So they're already in not mid-season form, but they've played some games, and LAFC obviously in preseason form. So we didn't see as much possession from LAFC, I think, as we'd like. But going back to the last couple years, LAFC has not necessarily been a high possession team since probably 2-3 years ago, the year that they won MLS Cup, and Steve's, style of play is a little bit more defensive and countering and exposing space. And obviously with the players that he's had, that's worked. I think that it'll be very interesting to see if we're going to continue to see a little bit more of like that defensive shape, and then the ability to counter and take advantage of space that obviously a guy like Denny Bouanga does a really good job of exposing, or if there's going to be some moments in the game where they try and take the ball and hold possession and create it out of, the creativity of that possession. And so I think that's really interesting. And look, Max, if you look at some of the top teams in MLS over the last 2-3 years, right? Because there's ebbs and flows in how we play, the tactics, the formation, and all that stuff. But you go back to last year, obviously Galaxy won. The year before was the Columbus Crew. Two teams that are highly possession oriented, right? And so it will be interesting if there's a little bit of a, shift into that, or if LAFC will still stick with the, staying tight in the back and potentially playing, with a 3-back with wing backs or with the 4, but the ability to counter quickly. And I think that we saw a lot of that against Club America. You look at the goals against Club America, every single goal, not only the 2 for LAFC, but the one against us, we're all off, counterattacking and stealing the ball in precarious positions. And so that's one of the most interesting questions that we have to look forward to.
I love that. Something to keep an eye on. We encourage you to ask questions if you're listening to LAFC YouTube and LAFC Facebook. Craig Griffin, a friend of the show for many years, he said Mark Delgado or Vladimir Putin last season. Who do you think would be more likely to sign for LAFC? Obviously, tongue firmly in cheek. But I think people were surprised that Mark Delgado comes from Galaxy to LAFC. But we've spoken to him, and it had to be a shock. Because he has to go through all of that. No, there's a lot of eyeballs. But we saw him at Coachella. He had the scarf, the 3252 around him. And based on everything, it's something that he is starting to really get excited about. He has to. I mean, you're here. We saw that with some of the other players. And Kosi Tafari had a soundbite saying, this is a club you want to be at.
I think Mark Delgado is going to come in with a chip on his shoulder. I mean, I know him a little bit. I've never played with him, but I've heard, stories about him that he's an incredible professional, and he's just won a championship with the next door neighbors. And now he's been traded away. He's going to want to win a championship now with LAFC. And if he had his way, LAFC against Galaxy in the conference finals, so that he can, exact his revenge.
So let's go quickly over some of the other new players. I want to mention Odin Holm. We'll wait and see a bit as he picked up an injury in the preseason, but they expect him to add depth in the midfield. Yao Yaboa could be a guy that plays a lot of positions, ex of Columbus Crew. The Jude Terry was with the under-17s. He helped qualify them for the FIFA Under-17 World Cup, so congratulations to him, and that he's going to fill out his calendar as well. And Kosi Tafari, Jeremy Ebobisse, I think, are two guys that you want to focus on. MLS know-how, guys that you've seen on the playing field. How do you see they incorporate into? I should also mention Artem Smolyakov still getting integrated, the Ukrainian fullback. But Ebobisse and Tafari, how do you see them incorporating into the team?
So I'll start with Ebobisse. He's had a very good MLS career. I thought he had very good seasons at San Jose, although, not on a winning team in the last few seasons. But he's a guy that, I told Steve Cherundolo that I think he's a very interesting signing. And look, Giroud is the starter right now, but he's also 38 years old. So, we saw Kai Kamara play a ton of games, ton of minutes last year. And I think we'll see the same with Jeremy Ebobisse. And so I think he'll be a guy that, LAFC is going to love. He's a guy that works hard. He's a guy that has a knack to get on the end of things. With the way that LAFC has always been built every single year, the forward position has always been the most difficult one because you have such quality on the wings and in midfield. What fits best, right? And so I can remember all these players that have gone through, and it's not necessarily the best player all the times that fits the best. And so I do think Jeremy Ebobisse fits a lot of the stuff that LAFC does, and I think he'll be a very, very important piece. And then Tafari is a guy that, was excellent with Dallas. He's a guy that is no nonsense. I remember his quote when Dallas was playing Messi, and he basically said, yeah, everybody's come here for Messi, but I'm still going to go out and do my thing. And he did, and he was a guy that he's not, scared of the big lights, and he's still a young guy that's coming, he had his breakout year, but I think he's got more to prove. And so I think Aaron Long is that one guy at center back, but Tafari is going to be, fighting for a position with all the other guys, Marlon, Chanot, Eddie Segura. I don't know if I'm missing anybody, but it'll be interesting to see who eventually pairs up with Aaron Long, further into the season. And I think Tafari is going to have a say in there.
You got to feel good about the center back depth. That's a lot of good guys. Chanot was by and large the starter last season down the stretch. Eddie Segura played the whole preseason, so he looks ready to go. And Marlon, they brought him in short contract, but he's playing to stay here longer, so he's going to be inspired. But Aaron Long, Tafari, those are two guys that you said can get in set piece opportunities. Very athletic. You don't get to see too many center back pairings like that. If it's in fact, but he's got to see if he can move up the pecking order. But if you want to play center back, Aaron Long is the captain. Aaron Long is going to be the guy. But to me, that's a really interesting development. Who's going to log the most minutes alongside him, at least for the beginning couple months of the season?
Right. And look, let's not forget, Aaron Long is also an older player. So he's not going to play every minute of every game. And so every single player in there is going to be incredibly important for Steve to be able to, keep everybody fresh and everybody happy to some extent as well.
Let's look at your 2025 key players. Benny's 2025 key players. Some guys that LAFC absolutely need to produce if they want to hit their targets, which is winning trophies, being there at the end of the season, having a great regular season, and being one of the top 2 or 3 teams in the Western Conference. Who do you see?
So I'm going to key in on guys that I think we're not sure of what we're going to get yet, right? Because there's guys on the team that we kind of know, like a Mark Delgado. I think I'm pretty certain of what we're going to get from him, and we can go down the line, right? Big position is the number 9, right? What do we see from Giroud and Abobasi? I think 2 guys that are incredibly important. Giroud, we all know he's a very high talented player and very high quality, but how does he fit in? And obviously there's the age, right? When you start getting older, nobody's beat Father Time in a long time or ever. Maybe, I don't know, maybe we can go to other sports like Messi's. I mean, he's almost 40. So maybe we could say somebody has, but it's very rare to see guys playing at a, all-time high at 38 years old. So it'll be interesting to see how those 2, share minutes and who ends up becoming the natural starter as the season progresses. I think another piece, which is huge, is Igor Jesus, who we talked about a little bit. He's got all the quality, all the talent. He's never been an out-and-out starter yet, right? He came from Brazil. I think he might have gone from somewhere from Flamengo. I don't know if he came directly from Flamengo.
He played in Portugal and Estrella Amadora, and they really missed him. I mean, when he left, they were pretty shocked because I think he was viewed as the favorite player of many fans.
Yeah, and so it's going to be very interesting how he adapts, how quickly. Again, people don't realize how difficult MLS is to adapt because of so many things, right? The style of play is one, the travel, the heat, the weather, etc. And so I'll keep my eye on him because I think he's an incredibly important player. If he has a good season, I have no doubt that LAFC has a great season. And then the last piece is what we talked about, the center back partnership between what we would assume is Aaron Long and player X, right? And who that player is, what do they look like, how connected are they? Is it going to always be a 4-3-3, or will Steve, at times shift into a back 3? Those are all the big questions, and I think those are the key players / key positions for the year.
Yeah, El Cipote Warren saying age is just a number. So, by the way, players get older and older. I mean, we see these. I know, like you said, Kai Kamara hit 40. We had like 2 40-year-olds playing. That was unheard of. And I also want to mention this. Please, if you're listening on YouTube or Facebook, leave a comment. We'll be happy to answer here during the show or after the show. We have Igor Jesus, Brazilian player. Gabriel Peck at the Galaxy might be the most valuable player right now in MLS. We never used to have Brazilian players. You used to be the only Brazilian player we had.
Nobody even knew I was Brazilian. That's the problem.
Probably no one here knows you were Brazilian until I mentioned it.
Yeah, exactly.
Brazilian born from Carioca from Rio de Janeiro. Benny.
That's right. And Max, by the way, I forgot one player that I wanted to mention, and that's David Martinez. I forgot about that. Obviously, LAFC sold Matty Bogusz, and that is a massive shoe to fill. I think right now it seems like David Martinez is going to be the one is playing on that right wing spot. Maybe Nathan Ordaz gets some minutes there as well. I loved him last year with the twos. I coached against him, and he was fantastic. Actually, last game of the year that we played against them, and he was, bar none, the best player on the field that day. And so I think he could have a breakout season as well, but that position is going to be interesting on the right side of the field.
Well, a lot of people looking at Nathan Ordaz to be that guy from the academy that makes that breakthrough. Clearly, you saw he's put in the preseason work, and it showed with that great goal against Club America. Although he mishit it, but putting himself in position and just shot out of a rocket off the bench, which was fantastic. So there's a lot. I mean, it's a really interesting team because there's so many different players that you want to see deliver. Maybe not all of them do, but there are some options, I think, to see where LAFC can excel if player A or player B are able to make that breakthrough. So I think it was pretty thorough. The CONCACAF Champions Cup kicks off tomorrow, and it's going to be cold. The CCC in the cold. We already have some news that Inter Miami playing Sporting Kansas City is postponed for a day. It is cold in the Midwest. It is cold in the Mountain Time Zone where Colorado is. We haven't heard anything about the Rapids game possibly being postponed, but we never know if it is that cold, and we expect it to be in the single digits. And that game, LAFC will be heading out there later tonight. Be ready for it. And this is a real challenge. Remember, they played in that snow game last year. I know some folks were asking here, how do you feel about the Miami game postponed? But LAFC game went the full 90. When you look at the snow is obviously tough to play in. But I think CONCACAF is trying to protect people with the cold, which is going to be debilitating. You've played in the cold, Benny. How do you possibly? What a player does to prepare for that, and how uncomfortable is it?
Yeah, well, surprisingly, I played in a lot of cold games. I played, I think, in the coldest MLS Cup final against Real Salt Lake for Sporting Kansas City in 2013, and half the field was frozen. So that's probably something that we don't want to, have to deal with. And hopefully now, with, I think most stadiums have the warmers, the warm heaters or whatever under the grass, so that should keep the guys from having to put ice skates on. But yeah, I mean, the Miami Kansas City game got postponed by a day. I'm hearing it's more about snow rather than cold. And as long as, tomorrow in Colorado, it's not snowing, I think we'll have that game.
Because of snow in LAFC. I mean, I'm sure they'll have a list of issues with that. But that game, again, 7 p.m. Eastern time. FS2, also TUDN, check out their local listings with how that game is. What do we think the outlook is for this game? Because the second leg will be the following Tuesday. I think the rule of thumb says don't concede too much. But I think LAFC would be eager to find a way to put this tie somewhere out, get the Rapids out of their competitive spirits in some way. What would you think the approach be, seeing that it's the first game of the season, seeing that it's going to be in a blistering, undesirable weather conditions, but it is a means to an end to make sure that you're able to advance in the CONCACAF Champions Cup?
Yeah, it's really interesting, and it's a difficult one to know exactly what's going through Steve Trundle's head right now. I would say that, yes, in a perfect world as a fan, you want to go out there, split the doors wide open, come home with a 3-0 result, and now you can pick and choose what you want to do at the home game. But in reality, Colorado is a good team, right? They had a really good team last year that they built, and they should only get stronger based on the chemistry and cohesion that they've built throughout the season, and now into year 2 over there with Chris Armas and the new roster that they built. And so, I mean, to me, a good result is a draw. You get a draw over there. You don't lose the game. You now have the ability to come home and win a game at home at your place in front of your fans. I think that should be, what we're looking to do. And you tell me if I'm wrong here, Max, but I'm pretty sure that CONCACAF CCC still has away goals. So an away goal is incredibly valuable, right? If it's a 1-1 draw, you start the game back at home already winning the tie. And so I think getting a draw and getting a goal, those would be the 2 keys that I would put for this game.
The last bastion of away goals. We didn't even talk about altitude, but I mean, that's the triple whammy. First game of the season, blistering cold, and altitude. I don't think anyone wants to even bring up the altitude because you're worried about the cold. Maybe it distracts them from the altitude, so maybe it's a blessing in disguise, but what do I know? I'll be watching the game here in very warm Redondo Beach in comparison.
Lucky you.
Hey, man, it is what it is. So that is a game. And if LAFC advance, they will get the Columbus Crew, who, by the way, just sold their best player. So the Columbus Crew, if you can get by the Rapids, is a much more desirable matchup now because no Cucho Hernandez. Christian Ramirez has gone to the LA Galaxy. So, I mean, this is they're very good. They got arguably the best coach in the league, but one step at a time. But you could see how the path could get opened up. That's how we approach these tournaments, Benny.
Sure. I think we got to be careful with Columbus. Let's see Colorado, but I mean, I don't know if anybody wants to face Columbus. They're always going to be a tough team with or without Cucho.
Right. And I'm not saying I want to face him, but the reality is they're probably not as good without Cucho. But Colorado Rapids first and foremost, and then we will see. And, the one thing they mentioned in the quarterfinals could be Inter Miami, but now Inter Miami has to deal with a very stout Sporting Kansas City and the elements of their own. LAFC on Saturday will have their 8th season opener. They will take on Minnesota United at home. Making sure you get out there to BMO Stadium. Will be one of 3 straight home games when you include the CONCACAF Champions Cup. So an exciting home stretch. LAFC 7-0 in home openers, 6-0 in the last 6 years. All those games occurred at home. The first was in Seattle. Benny Feilhaber on the field. As Adrian Healy, who broadcast that game, says, you'll never forget your first. So we're going to go with our first black and gold rewind. LAFC at the Sounders, March 4th, 2018. Getting ready for not only the first game of the season, Benny, but the first game of the LAFC history, period. What was going through your mind as you prepared for this?
Man, that was a long time ago, but it seems like yesterday as well. And it was an unbelievable feeling to be part of a team for the first game of its history. I've never had that experience other than that moment. And so to be able to be in the first starting 11, the first win, obviously the first preseason, the first season, part of the relationship that we built with the fans, et cetera. I think the things that I remember about that game is, one, that every single owner from our 150 ownership group was there, right? They were all there in the box celebrating. And the other thing that I remember is we didn't play that great, right? We didn't know who we were. That was the thing. No one knew who we were, what to expect, even the players. And I even remember thinking back, is Diego Rossi going to be a great player in this league? Is Carlos Vela going to be a great player? Is he going to be the right DP? You go through all these ideas because, look, it does take this adaptation to fit into MLS. And obviously, you fast forward and now you know that those questions that I had in my head were crazy, because Carlos Vela is arguably the best player that ever played in this league, and Diego Rossi is still lighting it up. Sorry about the light again, but that day was special. And I think we learned a lot about ourselves as a group and as a team. And I think the fans, more than anything, got to see what they were going to be able to witness week in, week out with this team, a team that gave everything with some brilliant soccer along the way.
I remember the ownership group because I was there for ESPN, and I'd look up to the box they were in. And when Diego Rossi scored, all you could see is a silhouette of heads and arms going, yeah. And because it's disappointment for all the Sounder boxes because they're Sounder fans, with the exception of that one. And it was packed.
It was.
It's just bodies in there. So it was very cool. We had a question. Someone was asking about Carlos Vela and what's going to happen next. We're not sure, but we certainly are hoping Carlos Vela is a big part of this club for many years to come. You mentioned him, but just that opening season, a question about Carlos Vela. He said, we didn't know. What did you learn about Carlos Vela in that season that you played with him?
Oh, man, what I learned was he is the perfect DP in this league, because what everybody saw was on the field, right? And the ability that he had to change a game. Literally, he was a game changer and would turn a loss into a win or whatever. But the part that people I don't think necessarily appreciate as much, and because they can't see it, is the kind of person that he was off the field, right? And so you bring in big stars from South America, Mexico, Europe, and maybe they're, fantastic players, but they're not glue guys in the locker room. And Carlos was that guy, right? He was, I know a lot of people say, or I know there's stories about him not loving soccer. He loves basketball. And maybe that is or that isn't or whatever. But the fact that he was like that made him such a modest person that didn't care about how well he was doing, or that he was the star, or that he was the captain. He was the guy that never complained. And so what it didn't allow anyone else to do was complain. If our best player is happy all the time and he's, we lost, but he's still ready for the next game, well, then that just infected all the other guys, contagiously in a positive way. And to me, he was the absolute perfect DP for MLS.
Brilliant. Something I've never heard before. So I'm very glad we were able to ask you. So thanks for everyone for the questions. Hank's wife wants to know if anyone's want to sell me a Campeones scarf. I wonder if Hank's wife is out there in Colorado. We're expecting a group of very brave LAFC supporter fans there, and a lot of love for Benny as well on the program. Again, we will be here every Monday, 12:30 Pacific time, live, LAFC YouTube, LAFC Facebook. Join the conversation. Benny, we'll see you again Monday, where we will recap the Minnesota game.
Let's do it. Let's hope for 2 dubs.
2 dubs. Big week. The season is here. Thanks for joining us. On behalf of Benny, I am Max. We will see you right here again next Monday afternoon.